Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, ciao, bonjour, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hey, my name is Jedlie. Welcome to Reading with Your Kids, an iHeartRadio Best Kids and Family Podcast Award nominee. We are so honored and so delighted that you join us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. We do that by sharing fun, thoughtful, and thought-provoking conversations with fascinating people who just happen to be writing books for kids of all ages. Please be sure to tell all of your family and friends about the show and let them know that they can hear us on the WREB AM/FM 24/7 radio network. And they can subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple, Amazon Music, Good Pods, Podcast Addict, CastBox, Player FM, Himalaya, Boomplay, wherever you find your favorite shows. We have two wonderful guests for you today. Chiara Colombi is going to be here to celebrate Rocket Ship Solo Trip. And later in the show, we will be meeting Heather Duke as she celebrates her debut children's book called Two Shoes.
You've heard the whispers. You've seen it on TV. You may have even seen the movie. Now it's time to bring Dungeons and Dragons directly to you with D&D for Hire!
More than just a game, D&D lets you step into the role of a hero you create and guide them on fantastical adventures with your friends. Perfect for beginners and experts alike, D&D for Hire is sure to delight and entertain your kids for weeks on end.
Such a fun game. There are endless possibilities. There's so many things that you can do. It's so much fun.
Our son Eli loves D&D. It's like his favorite thing to do all week.
I was like 15 when I joined. I'm 21 now. There are people who are in our party, really learn to come out of their shells.
Whether you're near or far, whether you're looking for a birthday party or a campaign to keep you adventuring for years to come, D&D for Hire has you covered. Learn more at dndforhire.com. That's dndforhire.com. D&D for Hire, bringing the adventure to you. D&D for Hire runs games digitally over Zoom or in person in select areas.
This episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by The Books by Robert Provan, Sammy and Scarlett's Mangrove Adventure, and Sammy and Scarlett's Coral Reef Adventure. The first book in the series, Mangrove Adventure, recounts the tale of two young fish who live in a tidal pool in the Florida Keys. Sammy is a sergeant major fish, and Scarlett is a yellow-tailed snapper. They are different species from one another, and they don't look anything alike. But despite this, they become best of friends. They learn that it's not the color of a fish's scales that matters, but rather whether or not they have a loving heart. Sammy and Scarlett's Coral Reef Adventure is the second book in the series and tells the story of Sammy and Scarlett's continuing journey from the shelter of the mangrove forest in search of their adult home on the coral reef. The two fish are befriended along the way by Howie, the hawk-billed sea turtle, who helps them through the dangers they will face ahead. Together, the three explore the amazing underwater city that is a coral reef. You and your family are going to love these books. Check them out today. The Books by Robert Provan. This episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by Junior Miles and the Junkman. Great middle grade novel written by Kevin Carey. Junior and his family live in a junkyard where his father creates pieces of art from the junk surrounding them. When Junior's father falls ill and dies, Junior and his mom are left with few resources other than what his mother brings home from her job as a waitress. The junkyard is threatened by encroaching development, and just when Junior thinks all is lost, he finds that a junk sculpture of a man gifted to him by his father begins to speak to him. The junk man provides advice in the form of enigmas. Are they clues, or is it just nonsense? Junior and his best friend Isaac embark on a journey to find out. Can a man made of junk parts teach Junior about art and friendship and overcoming the loss of a loved one? Only if Junior believes it can. This is a really wonderful middle grade novel. You and your kids would love it. Check it out today. Junior Miles and the Junkman by Kevin Carey. My friends, we are about to take a wonderful trip. Our guest is joining us from sunny California. She is here to celebrate her debut picture book. It's called Rocket Ship Solo Trip. Please welcome to the show, Chiara Colombi. Hey, Chiara, how are you?
Hi, Jed. Thank you so much. I am so happy to be here today, connecting with your listeners. Thank you for having me.
I'm delighted to have you on. Tell us all about Rocket Ship Solo Trip, please.
Sure. So Rocket Ship Solo Trip, I've got a copy of it right here, is the story of a young rocket braving her first journey up into space. And it really tries to tap into all of the emotions that you feel when you're doing something big for the first time. So much like kids, going to school, first day of school, or maybe first piano recital, first time down the water slide at the water park, any of those big experiences where the emotions are excitement and positive, but also some nervousness and also some hesitation and, what's it going to be like? And can I do this? That's basically what I try to tap into with this story.
Yeah. One of the things that I didn't think about that much when my kids were young, because I was dumb, and I'm getting a little bit smarter as I get to be 100 years old, but I never appreciated the fact that, kids, every day a kid is doing something for the very first time. Mm-hmm. And it is thrilling for them and exciting and terrifying and wow, what a way to live life. I mean, I think I don't know if we realize that maybe that's one of the things that we're so jealous about when we look at young people.
Yeah, they're constantly, everything is new. Like everything is new. The number of times that it suddenly dawns on me that one of my kids, I've got two boys, one of them is realizing something for the first time. I mean, the other day, I feel kind of bad. We were talking about dinosaurs and we were talking about Hawaii or something. And my son was like, well, are there dinosaurs in Hawaii? And I said, no, honey, all the dinosaurs are dead. And he just said, what? And I didn't realize, like, oh my goodness, maybe I should have softened my tone when I said that. I hadn't put it together. He's 4 years old. He just hadn't realized that yet. Yeah. So much is new. So it's like information that's all new. And then just everything that we're asking them to do. So many times we don't realize we're asking them to do something for the very first time. And that can be emotional. It can be a lot.
Yeah. And I think it's so important for us to keep in mind with our kids, with our grandkids, with the kids in our lives that we love and that we care for sometimes, so that we are sensitive to the fact that they might think that the dinosaurs live in Hawaii and they'll be bummed out to know that they're all dead.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
There's so much, I think, that we take for granted in our lives. And we talk a lot here in the podcast about being mindful. And and I'm an old guy, so it's hard for me to embrace a lot of the mindfulness and the kind of woo-woo stuff. But I try, and I think it's, being mindful, especially mindful of what our kids are going through, is so very, very important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's one thing that writing this book made me realize is how being mindful can just be talking about things in advance. Acknowledging emotions as soon as you see them, but also remembering, oh, okay, this is going to be the first time. This is going to be something new. Why don't we talk through what it's going to look like? And that could be like babysitter coming over. One thing that happened once, the first time my mother-in-law lives in Italy, the first time she came to visit us, she comes for like a nice chunk, like a month and a half. And when my son was really young, one of my sons, she came to visit and we got really used to just having her in the home. And then one day she was gone and we kind of forgot to let my son know in advance, like, Nonna's going to be going home soon. Oh. We didn't give him enough of a buffer to process. Oh. And then all of a sudden sleep cycles are all off. Everything's thrown for a loop for these poor little guys. So much of helping kids process life is just setting up expectations, giving a heads up, talking through what it's going to look like. And then they'll be like, oh, okay, when the thing happens, they'll have, some framework within which to experience it, as opposed to it just suddenly being, oh my goodness, world is turned upside down. You learn these things, as you go.
Where did my grandmother go? She disappeared.
Yeah. Yep.
And then you say she went back to Italy, and it's like, oh, you said the dog went back to Italy, and that dog didn't come home. You said this.
Right. Confusion. I mean, yeah. If you don't know what to expect, it's all going to be a little bit you're going to be like, kind of antsy, all along. Yeah.
Well, I think that's, it's being mindful of that, I think, can really enhance, not only make us better parents, but also help us appreciate and enjoy those moments even more. Like the first time your kid jumps into the pool by him or herself, and just kind of imagining what it is your kid is feeling instead of sitting there going, why are you making such a big deal? You jump in the water all the time. It's like, no,
Exactly.
this really is a big deal.
Yeah. Acknowledging it, helping them find the words for what they're going through as well. Because so much of it is also vocabulary. They just might not even, they're feeling something, but they don't even know how to tell you what they're feeling. And it's interesting sometimes when you can like talk to kids about their emotions and you start with the high level, like sad, happy, but then you can get a little bit more nuanced, nervous, excited, fine tune the emotions and help them work their way through words to understand the range that they're feeling. And understand that you can feel more than one emotion at once. It's not necessarily everything's bad or everything's good. There can be some good in the bad, some bad in the good. There's emotions are complex and kids don't always have the words to share with us exactly what they're feeling. So that's, another thing that I love about stories is that they give kids more words,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And with those more words, they're able to express their emotions better. They're able to tell their own stories.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Has being a children's author, being a storyteller for kids, has this been a dream of yours for forever?
It truly has forever. So it's funny because when, in my author bio, I say Chiara Colombi never knew she wanted to be a writer. I think that's in the back, copy of the book. And I say that because so many authors, when you hear them talk, they say, oh, well, at 5 years old, here's my first book. I wasn't that person. I didn't realize like writing books was a thing that somebody, and absurdly, because my mom, was a children's librarian. So we were surrounded by books and she was always reading the stories, but it just never connected in my brain that this was a thing I could do. Maybe I thought of myself more as a librarian than a writer. So I didn't know until college. Like it wasn't until college that I really realized, oh, this is the thing that really sparks joy in my life. I was actually studying biology and I was going to do pre-med path of all things to become an astronaut because I'm not a jet plane flyer. I cannot pilot a craft of any sort. I wouldn't want to do that. But I would love to do science up in space. I'd love to be the person who's like doing those experiments, seeing how plants grow and all that. And I thought, well, if I do bio and then pre-med, that should get me a pretty good resume to apply to NASA to become an astronaut. At the same time, I was like, you know what? I'm going to take a poetry writing course. As a teenager, so many teens write poetry. It'd be fun just to lighten the load. And then all of a sudden I was like in my bio lab studying paramecium, like under the microscope, and then writing poetry. And I suddenly, no, the poetry is the thing that I'm supposed to be doing. So I pivoted entirely, became an English major, and it was during college that I realized, stories are what bring me so much joy and writing in particular words. And that's definitely fostered by all the books that my mom read to me as a kid and then the world of books that we lived in with her as a librarian. Yeah. It's been since then. And then it's just been many years of trial and error and figuring out what works, what doesn't work. And now here we are finally with a picture book.
And did that desire of possibly being an astronaut, did that influence you in terms of how you were going to talk about emotions and all this other stuff?
Yeah. Things like it didn't really. I love space. I ended up doing an astronomy minor. I squeezed some space, some science into my college studies. And my love for space, I also wanted to foster with my kids. So the idea for Rocket Ship Solo Trip in particular came about because my oldest at the time was 2 years old. It was Christmas time. And I was like, okay, he can't really tell me what he wants for Christmas. I want to get him a rocket ship. I want to play with some rocket ships with him. And it'd be nice if I could pair this with a book. And there are so many beautiful picture books that are space centered, out there right now. We live in this beautiful era of picture books and you can get something for everyone, rovers, planets, all these different, the picture book biographies, the nonfiction that tell the stories of so many incredible scientists. What I couldn't quite find, like I just, and maybe there's something out there that exists, but I couldn't find a story that was quite hitting the note that I wanted and that featured a rocket ship as the main character, you know, with a smile on her face and everything. And then there was that light bulb moment of, oh, this is the story I need to write. So it's definitely inspired by my love for space and me wanting to encourage a love for science in my kids. And it just didn't occur to me that, my goodness, my first book, finally, I've been working on this for years. It's kind of like my own little astronaut journey. You know, finally I am an astronaut by way of this book and this character.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, don't feel bad that you didn't get it right away, because I was doing the Reading with Your Kids podcast for 2 years before someone pointed out to me how neat it was that our studios was located in the neighborhood of Reedville. And I just never made that connection because, I don't know.
That's so cool. Are there lots of bookstores in Reedville?
Unfortunately, no, they're not. Reedville is a very beautiful and historic neighborhood of Boston, but there's not a lot of shops and things like that. It is the home 2 blocks away, down that way. Not that you can see me pointing, but there's a playground here. It's called Meg's Field, and it was a parade ground for the Massachusetts 54th Regiment, which was the first black regiment that fought in the Civil War.
Wow.
And so this whole area was an Army training base. And now it's there's a nice little memorial to those soldiers. And I think the best memorial is that this is a really neat, diverse, loving, caring neighborhood of people that just come together and live together and love being together.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
I don't come up. I haven't seen too much of Boston, but now I'll add that to my list.
Absolutely. Hey, are you excited like I am? Now, I remember where I was when I heard that we had landed on, not we, that you know, man had landed on the moon. I was in my aunt's car. We were coming back from seeing a Godzilla movie and a matinee at the local theater. And we heard on the radio that the rocket had landed. And then later on, I saw the one small leap for man and all that. And then the space program, we kind of went to sleep on it. And I am so excited that people are interested in exploring space again.
Mm-hmm. Oh, same. I am so excited for the new missions that are lined up. I've been checking out NASA's website pretty regularly recently to stay on top of everything. It really seems like there's a lot going on. One of the more cool things that I've recently was digging into is one of the rovers that's on Mars right now is collecting soil samples, and the plan is for an unmanned rocket to go to Mars, launch another mini rocket that will go down to the surface of Mars, collect the soil samples from the rover, and then launch itself back up into space to be caught by the other ship and brought back to Earth so we can study the soil on Mars. I mean, that's just, I love
That's wild. It's like Uber from Mars.
Yeah.
It's
such a ride.
I mean, when you think about it, it's like, this is why that you can, people way smarter than me can sit down and go, okay, and send the rocket off and figure all that out, where Mars is going to be. Because it's not like here you turn on Waves and the streets are all going to be the same to get, you know, if I wanted to drive out to California, I could find your house pretty easy because the house isn't moving. But Mars, we're moving and Mars is moving, and there's all these other asteroids and things in the way, and it just boggles my mind. But I'm just so happy that I can see it.
Yes. Yeah. And that was another thing I recently realized in looking into Mars more. The rovers that are on there, I mean, they've only seen a fraction because there's only so far they can travel, only so quickly that they can travel. There's so much more to explore on Mars, and knowing that we've got a lot of ideas and missions and things in the works, pretty exciting.
Yeah. And do you ever take the time to think that, hey, this is really cool for me. I'm really digging this, and it's exciting for me. But wow, just think of the things my kids are going to see in 20, 30, 40 years from now.
Yes, and that's kind of, I've been doing a couple of story times with Rocket Ship, and my kind of end note of Rocket Ship is, where are you going to go? when I read it to the kids is like, are you excited now? Do you love space? What would you like to see in space? What would you like to uncover? I'm preparing a presentation for later this week. I'm doing my first school visit, and I'm preparing a presentation in which I'm going to end with solar system. We're going to build the solar system together. I'm going to ask the kids to vote for the VIP, very important planet. And then I'm going to share with them, when we figure out what the VIP planet of the day is, a mystery about that planet, something that we don't know yet, because we don't know, even Venus and Mars that are so close to us. There's so many mysteries left. Mm-hmm. And I really want to encourage kids to explore those mysteries, whether by, maybe they want to become a scientist or an astrophysicist or in some way help us go there and find out, or kind of take my path, be a fiction writer, a science fiction writer, and think about, okay, these are all the possibilities within the universe. These are all the possibilities of the planets that we know. What stories lie within those, and how can we use story to, uncover more about ourselves as well?
Yeah, I love that. That's really fun. Now, what grade are the kids that are taking the poll? What age group?
So I'll be at an elementary school, and so there'll be two groups actually, and it'll be interesting to see, if the groups vote for different things. There'll be K through second grade, and then there'll be third through fifth graders.
Okay. I have a feeling the third through fifth graders, there's a real good chance that Uranus might be the.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but
Yeah, there's a chance for sure.
Hey,
yeah.
you shared with us that you sent your mother-in-law home. I mean, your mother-in-law traveled back to Italy, and you told me before we started recording that you spent some time living in Italy. Mm-hmm. When you were there, were you aware of children's literature, and if you were, how did it differ from what the literature is here in the United States, and what were the similarities?
That's a great question, and lots of different ways I could answer it. Like, one thing, I moved to Italy as a young adult, 25 years old, because I wanted more time to write. I was actually working in publishing in New York, and publishing is a phenomenal world. I mean, now I'm part of it on the other side. But I just didn't feel like I had enough time to dedicate to my own stories. And so I decided to kind of take a sabbatical and move to Italy. And then I loved it so much that I stayed there for years, became a translator because obviously work is important. And that was a fantastic job. But what I did feel is that, I mean, obviously I left the world of English kidlit behind, and I kind of distanced myself, because all along I was writing my stories. I was working on stories. But I did distance myself to a certain degree. That said, I feel like I've discovered the Italian kidlit space since moving back here, ironically. There are so many incredible artists in particular. I mean, there's the Bologna Book Fair. There's the Hans Christian Andersen Award, I believe it is, that they do. There's a lot of activities and events around kidlit in Italy, and a lot of great creators. Some of my favorite illustrators these days are, I notice on the cover, they're Italians, and they're living and working in Italy. But it is a different space in the sense that I think readership levels are just different over there. Uh-huh. I can give you an example. When one of my friends in Italy had a baby, it was their first child. Of course, my instinct is immediately, here's some books. And I had Italian adults saying, you're giving a newborn books? They can't read. And I'm like, but kids need books. And it's just not in the mentality to start so young. Mm-hmm. So I think as a result then, like, that's what I value so much about the States in particular, is I feel like we really do value getting kids books super, super young, because then they just form that, it's just a part of who they are. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to encourage that. Like, I still send books to all my Italian friends whenever they've got newborns. I think it's just something that it's just a slightly different culture and approach to reading over there. It's more viewed as like, okay, once you're in elementary school, that's when you start reading. Mm-hmm. Whereas, my experience has been, as soon as you can kind of cuddle up on my lap, you're reading.
Absolutely. I was reading to my kids in the womb.
Yeah.
It sounded really stupid, but I go, I read a book and it said this is good. So
yeah.
I haven't made this announcement yet, but I am going to the Bologna International Children's Book Fair in April.
That's fantastic.
So I'm very excited about it. So keep listening, subscribe to the show, and you're going to be hearing hopefully lots of content that we create while we're over there. I'm really
I can't wait to
really
hear.
excited
That's
about
intriguing.
it. And I have a feeling, everybody's telling me how good the food is in Bologna. I have a feeling I'm going to be a much bigger podcaster when I come back.
Yeah. I haven't been to Bologna recently, but my friends who have been have raved about the food.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited. And I'm excited for you. Now, Rocket Ship Solo Trip, it's your first book. Are there more books in the works?
Yeah, I'm happy to share. I can't share too much because, like so much in publishing, not yet fully announced, but we do have a Rocket Ship Book 2 in the works. It's set for publication in early 2025. So about a year from now, we'll be sharing with the world where Rocket is heading next. Actually, I hope we're sharing with the world sooner than that by way of an announcement. But yes, Rocket does have another mission in the works. Really excited about that.
That's really wonderful. And have your kids, are they old enough to appreciate that their mom is an author and she wrote this really cool book?
I would say yes. Yeah, I mean, they're both very excited for me. I'm just trying to think like the difference between how they approach it. My son who's in elementary school is just telling all his friends and like super excited. And he's been, pumping my book to his school librarian, just saying, "Oh, are you going to get in the library?" He's really excited. The younger one is more like, he sees my name on the page, but he's like, how? And then he saw some photos of, some of my friends who got the book because they pre-ordered, and it just arrived yesterday. And he said, "But wait, did you send them the copies?" And I said, "No, honey, it's in the bookstores and they can, get it themselves." So I think it's just like the level of his understanding of the world is smaller. So he sees we've got a couple of copies at home. That must be what's out in the world. Yeah. Whereas the other one can kind of appreciate the larger. Yeah. So cool. So there it is. Your son is just experiencing this new thing for the very first time. His mom's an author. Yes. Yeah. And that's been pretty special to have both my little kids at my side cheering me on and experiencing this with me. Like the moment that the books arrived, they were just as excited. They wanted to pull it out of the box. And even the moment that we learned who the illustrator was going to be, Scott Magoon, he's one of my favorite illustrators. His work is just glorious. And we were so excited to learn that he'd be illustrating them. That was, a couple years back. But we've shared each step of the way together, me with my kids and my husband. It's been wonderful. That really is wonderful. Well, we should share where people can go to find out more about Rocket Ship Solo Trip and also find out more about you. Yeah, sure. So you can find me online at chiaracolombi.com. So Chiara's Italian, as you may have guessed from all our conversations. It's CHIARA and then last name COLOMBI.com. I'm somewhat on social. I'm kind of timid on social. So I'm on Blue Sky mostly these days, and it's just at chiaracolombi.com. Occasionally, I still post to Twitter, X, whatever we want to call it, Instagram. There, I'm Chiara B. Colombi. That's my handle. I'd love to hear from your listeners. I'd love to, connect. Send me a note. You can send me a note through my website or on social. I'd love to hear from you. Wonderful. We've had a really great time speaking to the author of Rocket Ship Solo Trip, the debut picture book from our guest, Chiara Colombi. Chiara, thanks so much for being with us. Thank you, Jed. I really appreciate it. This episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by Facing the Beast Within, written by New York Times best-selling author Mark Cheverton. Cameron Poole has a problem, a big problem. He's a bully magnet who struggles with anxiety. Being the smallest sixth grader at his summer camp, everything around him triggers his anxiety, his beast, making it impossible for him to do the same things other kids can do. In a constant state of worry, Cameron feels like a perpetual failure. That's bad enough. But when Cameron learns that mythical monsters are trying to invade his camp, things go from bad to worse. You and your kids are going to love this exciting middle grade novel. It belongs in your family library. You're going to love it. Facing the Beast Within, written by Mark Cheverton. This episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by Becoming Strong by Anandamoy Baker. Becoming Strong is an illustrated children's chapter book about an adorable little bee named Jazzienza, who has a bent antenna and must wear glasses.
She gets bullied at times, and through the sage advice of Mama Queensy Bee, the queen bee, she learns to become strong, confident, and kind. The book not only helps children learn breathing techniques to deal with anxiety, but also enables them to connect on a deeper level with nature. In addition, a clear message in the book is that we are all important and valuable, and our lives have meaning no matter our size. Becoming Strong is a Reading with Your Kids certified great read and would be a fantastic addition to any family library. This episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by Melusine, Birds of Many Feathers. Put down your iPads, young explorers. Have you ever wondered about the mysteries hidden in your own backyard? Join Melusine on an adventure to uncover a mysterious bird right in her backyard. Look, over there. What bird could that be? On every page, meet a diverse world filled with feathered friends and neighbors. This tale is perfect for young readers aged 5 to 10, and it's not your ordinary birding adventure, but a true appreciation of biodiversity. And you know what? The adventure doesn't stop there. Melusine, Bird of Many Feathers, is an ideal companion for the Great Backyard Bird Count, which starts February 16th to 19th, 2024. Participate in this exciting event with families from around the world and bring the joy of bird watching to your home. Grab your binoculars, everyone. Melusine, Birds of Many Feathers is available now at your favorite bookstore and online. Autographed copies and exclusive offers are available at kiddlewingspublishing.com. Join us right now from the beautiful state of Florida. Our guest is here today to celebrate her debut children's book. It's called Two Shoes. Please welcome to the show, Heather Duke. Hey, Heather, how are you?
I am well. Thank you so much for having me.
I have to ask you, are you wearing two shoes for this interview?
Okay, I'm at home today, as usual, so not right now.
Okay.
Barefoot in a kitchen.
Well, I'm excited for you to tell us all about this new picture book.
I am so excited to share it with you, and I am honored that you would invite me on here. So thank you very much. And what would I share about Two Shoes from the start? It is a children's picture book. It is about 36 pages, which is the average, and it's written in rhyme. But my favorite thing about it is where it came from, where the inspiration started, which is that I have two sons. So I'm a stay-at-home mom. I have two sons, a 9-year-old and a 5-year-old. And it's been pretty regular that when it's nap time or bedtime, if I'm not reading from a children's book, I'm making up a story. And I've had all kinds, some silly, some short, some copies of other stories. But one particular time, I made up a story about a statue that was missing a shoe. And that originated because my 5-year-old, he's obsessed with Bluey. I'm sure if you have any small children in your life, they are also obsessed with Bluey, as is the whole world. And there's an episode about a magic statue. And that's his favorite episode. I mean, we have to play magic statue in our house a lot. So he said, Mom, can you make a story about a magic statue? And I said, sure. And I kind of just started telling the story about this statue, and he would wake up at night and he would cause all this trouble, and people were getting angry and they couldn't figure out what was happening at nighttime that was causing all this mischief, until a really brilliant, precocious little girl stumbles upon the mystery that it is in fact this statue. And when she confronts him at night to say, why are you causing so much trouble in our town? It turns out it's because he's kind of lonely. He doesn't have any friends. And so she says, if I start playing with you and hanging out with you at night, will this stop? Can we go back to normal? And they make a great friendship. And my little boy fell in love with that story, and he was laughing, and he just responded to it immediately, even better than the other stories I've told. And I said, did you really like that? And he said, yeah. And he said, would you ever like to see it with pictures? And he said, yes. At that moment, it just overtook me that I had to create this thing that I accidentally stumbled into during a nap time story. And I brought it up to my husband. I said, I think I'm going to write a book. And he said, yeah, sure, great, go for it. I mean, he didn't know. I've never done anything like that before. So I sat down and it just poured out of me. I really never felt inspired like that. And it was exhilarating and I was obsessed with it. And in about 2 months, I had self-published the whole thing, and it took off more than I expected. And now I'm here chatting with you.
Wow, what a story. Yeah, that's one of the things about the podcast is I get to hear these origin stories of how books came to be. And you're really lucky because I was similar to you. Every night when my kids were kids, it was story time, and very often they used to do this thing. I have a speech impediment. It was really bad when I was a kid. It comes out when I'm tired and when I have to deal with particular letters. F is one that stumbles me up. And so I think my kids, they were a little bit evil when they were young, and they would get out 1 fish, 2 fish, red fish, blue fish.
Oh, that's just mean.
And
but it made you practice.
And it did. And there was a Fox and Socks was another one. And they would just get these books, and but anyways, I also would come up with these stories. And there was one story I told them that they absolutely loved. And the next night they asked me to tell the story again. And I had zero recollection of what it is I told them. And I said, remind me, I think it'll come. And they couldn't, they just laughed so much and they wanted to laugh again. And I'm like, and to this day, I have absolutely no idea what that
And it could have been $1 million book.
Could have been $1 million book. Who knows?
But here's what I love about your story isn't that the definition of being in the moment, right? I mean, you were so in the moment. They were in the moment. You remember that there was a moment, the feeling of it, but the actual details leave you. But I think it's a beautiful thing to be in the moment. And the moments, so I haven't always been a stay-at-home mom. That's a recent development in only the past 3 years. I had a corporate career for 10 years. And then I resigned and decided that I needed to be home. And it's because I was watching my children grow up. Well, my firstborn, who's 9 now, but I was watching his childhood, through Facebook because my husband would be home during the day and he would send me pictures. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm just sitting here watching him on Facebook. I mean, he's 30 minutes down the road, but I've got to watch him here. I need to go home. I am missing moments, right? Moments like you just said. So then COVID had happened. Vegas shut down big time. I was originally in Las Vegas. I've recently moved to Florida in the past couple of years. So Las Vegas shut down a lot, pretty hardcore. And I was working from home before I had resigned. And I realized I could be home for lunches. I could be home for boo-boos. I could be home for nap time and storytelling. And it just ached in my heart that I was missing moments. And, so talked to my husband and we had no idea how we were going to do it. Financially, it made no sense whatsoever. But it was something I had to do. And I think between then and now, and especially with the move to Florida and just connecting with people here and being close to water, I feel like that's been a big impact on creativity coming out of me that I didn't have before. If you had asked me, gosh, I would say even a year or two ago, if I was a creative person or what my hobbies were, I don't think I could have answered because I hadn't figured that out yet. I just worked my whole life and I was very good at that, but creativity and hobbies and moments of inspiration, I just didn't have them. And so when this thing happened with my son and Two Shoes started in my head, it didn't have a name yet, obviously, and all that had to come together. I was so overwhelmed with the feeling because I shouldn't say never. I'm sure I felt it somewhere along the road, but I must have been a child. I don't remember that feeling before, where if I don't get this idea out of my head, I might go insane. I have to get it out. And so that's why I became obsessed, and it happened really fast, but it took off more than I expected. I said, if I sold one copy, and it was probably going to be to my sister, if I sold one copy, that I'd be happy because I just made it. It existed. I'd be happy. And, it did better than that. So like I said, now that's why I'm here talking with you.
Well, that's wonderful. One of the reason I started Reading with Your Kids podcast, and I'd love to tell you there was this big grand scheme and plans, and I was going to go here and there and everywhere. I wanted to do a podcast. Some experts told me I should do it on X because that's where my interest was, and I had a fan base there from my educational magic show, and I said, no, the relationship I have with my now adult kids, it's great. And I know it's great because of the foundation my beautiful wife and I built it on, and that was with reading. And that's what I wanted to pass on to families. And I think the reason it is there's so many reasons why it's special, and we've talked about a lot of them. But, I mean, you reminded me of one. It's because we are in the moment with our kids. It's the time when we shut off the devices, unless we're reading it on a Kindle, but
or listening to a podcast.
Right? But we're with our kids. We are intentionally with our kids. We're not responding to a crisis. We're not punishing them. When it's just, I'm putting everything down to be with you. That in and of itself is a huge statement, and it says to your kids, the most important person in their world thinks so much of them. They're going to tell the world to stop, so we can be together.
You're so right. I love what you said, because now I feel more connected to my children than I really ever have. Like I said, I came home and we're spending a lot more time together. I still struggle though, right? I think we all do, with how technology comes into our world, and I appreciate technology. And I think part of the problem is I actually really enjoy it. And part of publishing Two Shoes, and if anybody's listening who's ever gone into any exercise, not necessarily creating a book, but anything that you've created on your own, you signed up just to create that thing. And then you realize you also have to be a marketer, and you also have to be a public speaker, and you also have to be, a media manager, and you have to understand all this stuff starts coming in that you weren't expecting. I was never expecting any of that. In fact, I think I sent you an email this morning with all my new information, because I only just finished the website, and I only just finished the email with a specific domain, because I didn't think this was going to be a thing. And so I'm backing into the whole process. Well, creating this, this ecosystem around my book of a domain name and a profile and places where if you want to buy my book, you can find it easily. And then how do I easily get you to leave a review? All these things that are happening, almost sometimes feel like they're happening to me. They require technology. Mm-hmm. And so I, even in these past couple months, have realized that my usage of it has ticked up. And the 5-year-old is very quick to remind me, and I love him for it. And I'm bad, I know. So if you're doing this right now, put your phone down. But I'll be at the red light, and I'll check it, which is dumb because I'm going to be home in 10 minutes, and I could check it at home so I'll check it at the red light. And the 5-year-old, he goes, Mom, you're not supposed to do that. And I'm like, I know. And then I gotta put it down, or he'll be telling me a story and I'll be like, oh yeah, and I'll kind of glance over at my phone when I'm not supposed to. And this is what I love about him though. He's incredibly assertive, and he goes, I don't like to talk to you when you're not looking at me. Which is honestly language I've used with him, right? Mm-hmm. They're such mirrors, right? They're mm-hmm. mirrors who say back to you what you say to them. And there's been times where I've said, I'm speaking to you, you need to look at me. And then in that moment, I'm not giving him the same respect. And I love that he points it out to me. I'm working on it now. I think the obsession with my own story and this process, which is fun. This is fun. Like talking to you and doing the social, it's fun. But it's one of those things where the temptation to be pulled away from those moments is there, mm-hmm. which is the exact thing I'm trying not to do. So I'm aware of it. And if I ever forget, my 5-year-old will be quick to let me know.
Well, that's good. You were mentioning something, and I'm really glad you brought it up because we've talked a lot here in the show. We have a lot of authors and aspiring authors who listen. And I always am quick to remind folks that when you write a children's book, I know you're an artist, you're a creator, you're an author. But when you're launching a kid's book, if you're not the CEO of your small business, no one's going to read it. And so I'm glad that you're realizing that now. But as you were speaking and as you were talking about going, oh, I had no idea I had to be a marketing director and I had to do a webmaster and I had to do this and I had to do that and I had no idea how to do it, but I figured it out. That's kind of like being a parent.
That's a good comparison.
Yeah, because I know myself. I mean, I had worked with kids. My wife was a teacher and, so I had a clue. I wasn't clueless, but boy, when you have your own kid, that's a completely different animal. But you figure it out if you put the time in and you approach that challenge with love. I think it might be a divine, inspiration, or the universe is coming to you, whatever it is that you feel. We find ways to figure it out, or we find people in our lives that help us figure it out, or our kids help us figure it out. Like your kid is helping you.
Boy, do they. I appreciate what you're saying, because if I could go back, right? I'm an older lady now. I won't say how much older, but I'm older. And if I could go back to when I first found out I was pregnant, I was terrified. I mean, I was excited / terrified. I don't have the time. I don't have the money. And here we are, we're married. We have a home. I have a great job. Like, as far as all the puzzle pieces that you're supposed to have in place before you have children, I checked each of those boxes, and yet still terrified, so terrified. And I wish I could kind of go back and say, it's actually going to be just fine. Mm-hmm. These kids are going to be amazing. I would say that the mistakes that we make, are okay in the sense of if you can communicate with your children about the mistakes. So something that I've learned that is so important to me now is that it's okay to tell your children you were wrong. And it's okay to apologize to them when you've acted incorrectly. I am never going to pretend to be some perfect mom. Mm-hmm. I have moments where I'm impatient. I snap when we're running late out the door. I have my moments, right? I'd like to pretend I'm June Cleaver, but I'm not. But I try very hard, and I've been practicing. I guess that's what I'd call it. It's practice. Mm-hmm. It's practice of going back to them. If it's a couple minutes later, if it's a whole evening later, it might even be the next day, where I stop and I look them in the eyes and I'll say, hey, yesterday I really overreacted to that situation, and that wasn't the right way to speak to you. And I know you're a kid, but you deserve respect. And I should have respected you more, and I apologize. I really like using the word respect versus, and I love you, and I'm just a bit, but I do love them, and I add that too, obviously, but I think respect is a big one that I try to emphasize with my kids. Because then they see how to repair situations and how to treat others. So it's something I'm trying to work on. I think I'm better at it. Definitely, time teaches you things. And so over time I've gotten way better at it. But, I try very hard to remember, and I'm a Christian, I'm a believer, and that, my faith teaches me that God made every single person in his own image. These children are separate beings worthy of respect. They're mm-hmm. not little me, mm-hmm. and they're not my little minions. They're separate beings that deserve respect. And so the more I repeat that to myself, the more I reflect it to them. So, and hopefully that makes them into wonderful people, which so far I think they are, but I'm biased. So,
yeah. Well, you're preaching to the choir here. And I am absolutely one of the, if any time a new parent asks me for advice, I say to them, that pedestal that you kids put you on, get off of that thing as soon as you can.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Tell them you make mistakes. You're not perfect. Own up to it, because it just makes your life so much easier, because you're going to fall off the pedestal at one point. And if you kind of get off on your own and your kids see it and they learn from it, great. But if you try to stay up there until they're 8, 9, 10 years old, and then you have that big fall, they're going to be really disappointed.
That is powerful. I know it's not a therapy podcast, but I remember that fall. I had that fall, right? Mom and Dad were up here. There was a fall. Wasn't even that big a deal. And I won't say what it was because there's small children listening, but it had to do with learning that certain stories we're told as children aren't real about certain holidays. And I was devastated, just devastated, and called my parents all kinds of things. You're liars, and you tricked me, and how could you? And, you know, all this stuff. It wasn't even that, I mean, looking back on it, it was not that big a deal. But in my heart, my world was shattered. And I remember that, I think that's the moment I realized that my parents were capable of lying. I don't know why before it never occurred to me, but I guess in my head, I thought they don't lie. My parents never lie. And they know everything. They always tell the truth. And so when that moment hit me that they were capable of telling a lie, oh man, that rocked my world. And I tried to never, like you said, get off the pedestal. Don't set them up for that kind of heartbreak. I'll say to the 9-year-old, I'll say, you know, maybe he'll ask me a difficult question. You know, something, he came home from school the other day and an issue about racism came up in class. Somebody had said it to somebody else. He didn't know what the word meant really. And I realized we hadn't really talked about it. And so I said, okay, well, I never want to lie to you. And I always want to be honest with you, but I have to say it in a way that is 9-year-old friendly, right? And so most of the time my approach to that is a little bit of the Socratic method, which is let them ask some questions and then provide as simple a response as I can. A truthful response, but a simple response.
Yep.
I don't need to get into all the world's problems, and I don't need to get into every ugly thing that's ever happened, but I do have to be honest.
Yeah.
And so, you know, when difficult things like that come up, that's the approach I tried to take. And just one thought about that. My son, he was writing his spelling list, and he has to write sentences with the spelling list. Do you ever peek at those when your kids wrote those? Because I think it gives you a lot of insight to what they're thinking. At the bottom, one of the words was, I think the word was discussion or discuss, something like that. And the sentence said, I have great discussions with my mom. And I about fell apart. I'm like crying on top of this spelling list. And I said, he likes our discussions. He thinks we have great discussions. And stuff like that. If you go back to respect, if you go back to honesty, keeping it simple, but keeping it real, it goes a long way.
Yeah.
That would be my advice. You know, tell them the truth. Don't lie to them.
Absolutely. You know, we started the show talking about Two Shoes, and it was delightful. I think that people can really get a sense for what a story is all about by getting to know the author. And we've certainly gotten a chance to know you. One thing I haven't asked you, though, now that Two Shoes is out there, have you caught the kids' author bug? Will there be more stories coming from Heather Duke?
That is such a good question. So I'm on my 4th draft of the second one. But it's not, people have asked me, is it a sequel? It's not a sequel. It's a totally separate story. I am planning to announce the title on March 1st. So if I'm allowed to make a plug for myself, I would love people to visit my website and sign up for my reader list, because that's the first list that will find out the title. And so my website's just Heather Duke Stories, which I think is pretty simple to remember. HeatherDukeStories.com. And right there, kind of halfway down the page, you can see the reader list and sign up there. And if you do, on March 1st, I'll send an announcement about what the title is. My hope, and it's fingers crossed, not official, don't hold me to this, is that I would have it out before Mother's Day. So wink, wink, nod, nod. It might have a little bit to do with moms, because that's something I'm very familiar with. So anyway, visit the website, sign up for the reader list. There will be a second one. Yes, I've caught the bug, and now I don't know how to stop.
Awesome. Well, we don't want you to stop, and we want you to keep cranking out those stories. And we've had a really fun time speaking to the author of Two Shoes. It's the debut picture book from our guest, Heather Duke. Hey, Heather, this was a pleasure. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you again. I really enjoyed speaking with you.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Reading with Your Kids and will join us for the next exciting episode of the show. In the meantime, we would love for you to connect with us on social media, facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, at Reading with Your Kids on Instagram and TikTok, at Jedlie Magic on Twitter. Hey, are you a YouTube watcher, viewer, subscriber? Well, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/readingwithyourkids. There you will find every episode of the podcast. You will also find our 2 spin-off projects, Drawing with Your Kids. You and your kids can learn how to draw some of the amazing characters we've celebrated on the podcast, being taught by the illustrators of the book. I'm blown away by how much fun this is. You can also find our STEM is Family Fun videos, and we have created some really neat videos that will show you and your kids how you can explore the STEM fields in your home with some materials you can find in a typical home. And we've collaborated with some great institutions, the San Diego Children's Discovery Museum, the National Children's Museum down in Washington, D.C., and Children's Museum Houston. It's a series you don't want to miss it. Check it out. And if you are an author, please be sure to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Click on the Authors Click Here button up at the top of the page to find out how you can be a guest here on the show and celebrate your children's book with thousands of Kidlit fans all around the world. And of course, if you're a parent, check out the website too, readingwithyourkids.com. You can send us a message, check out our Certified Great Read Wall of Fame, and you can also let us know who you'd like to hear on a future episode of the show. Oh, and we have a great online magazine that you can download for free. Want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful, of course, starting with our wonderful guest, Chiara Colombi and Heather Duke. Also want to thank our great sponsors. My team, they deserve a big shout out. Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Chris Doherty, Skylar Strauss, Nick Warner, Kyoko Ito, Kayla Newland, Kristen Barrett, Cindy Swan, Hannah Rose. You know who deserves a huge shout out? My beautiful wife. Thank you for all of the support you give me. Most of all, the people who need the biggest shout out, well, that's you. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place. And you do that every time you read with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next episode of Reading with Your Kids.